So the UAW has filed federal charges against Trump and Elon Musk over worker strike comments. These comments, of course, were made during the viral exchange between Trump and Musk on X. Here to discuss is Mark Mix, the president of the National Right to Work Committee, a 2.8 million member public policy organization. He also serves as president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. So welcome, Mark. Thank you so much for being here.
Kristi, great to be on with you. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about this. Just another example of weaponization of the government to try to censor free speech. Outrageous.
And it and it's wild because, I know, I mean, I hear from real life experience because that's important to make sure you're tapped into real life instead of the narrative they shove down our throats, that many United Auto Workers are actually supportive of Trump. They know that, an economy under Trump and the jobs will be more secure under a Trump administration, and so it's wild that they're now, going to this extent, again, to attack speech. And so what do you make of it, and how successful will they be in this effort, do you think?
Yeah. Well, Kristi, let me first confirm what you just stated. And this is, I can use the president of the United Auto Workers Union to confirm your last statement, because facts are important. You talk about disconnect between union officials and rank and file workers. Well, Shawn Fain, the president of the United Auto Workers Union, who filed the charge against Donald Trump and Elon Musk at the National Labor Relations Board, which I'll talk about in just a second, was on TV on Fox News on Neil Cavuto back in early February of this year. And he came on right after the UAW had endorsed Joe Biden for re-election to the presidency of the United States. And this was a 14-member executive committee of the UAW that got together and said, despite anything else that you might hear from our rank and file workers and the people we claim to represent, we're going to endorse Joe Biden. So he went on TV shortly after that endorsement, and he said this, and I quote, he said, "Let me be clear. The great majority of our members are not going to be voting for Joe Biden. They're going to be voting for your paycheck." So, Kristi, your analysis is spot on, and that comes right from the horse's mouth, if you will, Shawn Fain, the president of the United Auto Workers Union. So, to your point about the Elon Musk, Donald Trump unfair labor practice charge they filed with the National Labor Relations Board. The National Labor Relations Board is the adjudicator of labor policy in America as it relates to unionization and how workers either get in or get out of unions. The former is very easy. The latter is very difficult. But they filed charges after these two were on X. Do I have to say formerly Twitter? I don't know if I have to say that, but X, talking about, just an interview with the two, and literally millions tuned in. And they said something about unionization and about strikes at a particular production plant. They didn't even mention it. And immediately, the UAW files a charge at the National Labor Relations Board saying this is an unfair labor practice, I guess, against Trump and his campaign workers and Musk and Tesla or SpaceX or whoever. But it's just a weaponization of government and another way to censor speech. It's outrageous, and it's probably not going to have any impact at all, other than the mainstream legacy media talking about how Musk and Trump are against the American worker, which is ridiculous.
What is your analysis of how the Democrat Party has been able to circumvent the rank and file workers and gain control of the leaders of these unions? Because again, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, the policies under the Biden administration usually hurt these companies to the point of threatening bankruptcy and loss of their members, the loss of jobs for their members. So how have they managed to get this control over them?
Yeah, this is a 90-year-old problem, Kristi, and it goes back to the Roosevelt administration when the federal government decided to basically federalize labor management relations in the country. There are a lot of politicians, particularly on the left, that say, never let a good crisis go to waste. And what they mean by that is when we have a crisis in America, use it to expand the power of government, to limit our freedoms, to limit our liberties, and make the government, the federal government or the state government for that matter, more powerful and more control over our lives. And that's exactly what happened in the 1930s with the financial meltdown, the so-called Great Depression. They used the federal government at that time, that crisis, to dramatically expand power. And that power was basically predicated on this notion that union officials could be the sole voice in a workplace if they could get a simple majority of those voting in a union election to vote for unionization. So that means in a bargaining unit of 100 people, if 50 people vote, 26 people bind the entire workplace to be, quote, spoken for by a union official. And so that power is unique. And then to add insult to injury, not only did they force association in a union, but they also forced the forced payment of dues or fees. And so now you have union officials that collect about $30 billion a year. Much of that money comes from workers who'd lose their jobs if they didn't pay. And it makes them wholly unaccountable to rank and file workers who they claim to represent, because the money comes out of their paycheck automatically. And if they don't pay it, they don't work. So that federal government power has given the union officials this dramatic power, and it's created what is this lack of accountability for the top bosses of unions here in Washington, D.C. and in state capitals around the country, and the rank and file they claim to represent. That disconnect's growing wider and wider, and this is another example. And Sean Fain's comment about the United Auto Workers Union, the great majority won't be voting for Joe Biden, and they probably won't be voting for Kamala Harris, but he has this power to force them to associate and to pay dues, and that's very unique in this grand experiment of self-government.
Does the whole concept of unions need to be kind of turned on its head? Because I think obviously they push a lie that Republicans are not for unions, because I know many Republicans that are very supportive of unions, understand the importance of employees having fair representation. But then it kind of, take Tesla, for example, like they're under intense pressure to unionize, but at the same time, if they were to do that, they would lose probably a lot of the benefits that they currently are afforded. Tesla has some of the very best benefits when it comes to healthcare, et cetera, in the entire nation. And if they were forced to unionize, good luck with keeping what's actually making a better quality of life for their employees. So does the whole concept of unionization need to be a little bit turned on its head? Because really it's what you were speaking to, the mandates, that the forced pressures and things like that, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And look, people often say, and they say to me when we talk, and say, oh yeah, there was a place for unions back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when employers were violating their rights and being unfair. But the bottom line is this: there is a place for unions. There will be a place for unions. And the only thing that basically should be taken out of the equation is the force and the coercion that they have under federal law. I mean, I believe, and I think many people believe, and over 8 out of 10 Americans believe, it's wrong to force workers to pay dues or fees to a private organization in order to work. They believe that if we install voluntarism back in unions that allows rank and file workers to hold union officials accountable, that changes the model completely. The federal law protects workers' rights to join together to amplify their voice in a workplace if they feel like they're being cheated. But it also comes with that baggage of compulsion and force, which is the special privilege granted to union officials. So the idea of unionization, and I think a lot of Republican politicians, not to make it partisan, but the fact is it plays out that way, that Republican politicians, they believe in individual employee rights, and those rights include the right to join together collectively to amplify their voice. But the idea of forced association and the forced payment of dues, that's the violation of the individual freedom and liberty that should be part and parcel of the rights of individual employees. And unfortunately, as I mentioned, for 90 years, that power has been granted to union officials, that privilege, and it's only expanded into the public sector, into the government sector, which is really an injustice. I mean, even Franklin Roosevelt, who signed the law to allow this power and privilege for union officials, was asked about the public sector. He said, you can't do that. We can't unionize government. That's impossible. It doesn't work that way. Because he knew that in the private sector, you had substitute goods. So if the union officials demanded too much in one company A, company B would fill the void, and market share would be redistributed. And to your point, Kristi, some people would lose their jobs if they demanded too much, or held out too long, or went on strike for too long, even though those rights exist and they're protected under federal law. So yeah, what we need to do to reform labor policy is not necessarily deal with the idea of, quote, unionization in general, but what we need to do is eliminate the force and coercion that's written into labor policy. That changes everything.
Wow, that is so well put. And just to wrap up, you're from the National Right to Work Committee. What is that exactly? Like, what can that do for people?
Yeah, Kristi. Well, first of all, we have two organizations. The Right to Work Committee lobbies in Congress and in state legislatures to, one, protect the right to work laws that exist in 26 states across the country, and two, to help basically fight back against any increase in forced unionism power that union officials are trying to get. And my goodness, under the Biden administration, they've gotten new privileges and powers through executive orders, not necessarily through a legislative action, but certainly through administrative executive actions. They've been extremely powerful. Our Legal Defense Foundation has been around since 1968. We provide free legal aid to employees whose rights have been violated by forced unionism issues, and we take their cases. We help to represent them at the National Labor Relations Board, in state court, in local court, and we've taken 18 cases all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, on behalf of individual workers who have the courage to stand up and fight back against this force and coercion that should not exist, but unfortunately does in federal law. So employees can go to the foundation, they can talk to a lawyer for free, they can talk about their case, and if it's in our kind of lane as it relates to forced unionism, we'll help them right to the end if they have the courage to stand up and fight with us against forced unionism.
Well, it's so important that you offer this. And for those that believe in this, you can make a donation on the website as well. Sounds like a worthy cause. You're truly supporting workers and their independence, freedom, and sustainability for their families. So thank you for your involvement, Mark, and also your insight on all of this. Thank you so much.
Kristi, thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it. And keep on doing what you're doing, too. We need more information out there, that's for sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you.